Time for us to take a look at the front pages of some select national dailies this morning to bring you up to speed with the stories making the headlines. And we begin with the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper for today. So let's take a quick look at it. Daily Trust for today, Wednesday, December 6, 2023. Here are some of the leading stories. 2024, Tinubu Shetima's trips. Mills to gulp 10 billion naira as villas animals get 201 million naira in the budgetary allocations. Now, scratch your head all you want, but life goes on for the top 1%, and none of the complaining is going to do much to change that. So, moving on. Court orders execution of ex-soldier for killing Yobe Islamic cleric. Available on page 31. We brought you that story a little earlier, and the other was sentenced to 10 years imprisonment. COP28, Sheyi Tinubu stewards, cooks among Nigerian delegation. I can understand cooks being there because obviously our leader has to eat. Stewards, his son, who sponsored him? That's the more interesting question. But anyway, I think this issue has been overflogged way too long. It's also been proven that you can register as a private indigent to go to COP28, but we'd like to know if the president's son took the trip on the government's dime or not. Follow the story on page 8. The big story is talking about the unfortunate development from Kaduna. It says Kaduna massacre, northern leaders. Others demand compensation. Residents narrate ordeals. Tinubu orders probe. We were pursuing terrorists according to the military, and Senator Shehu Sani, who is always going to be vocal about his thoughts, says your statement insensitive. Sanusi, Bamali, others call for calm. Amnesty International says attack a product of recklessness. You know what they say, Aisha? You do it once, it's a mistake. You do it twice, it's a coincidence. But 3 times or 16 times, it's a pattern. Right. It's a choice at this point. Right. So enough of the words mistake being used to describe what happened. It wasn't just a mistake. But there you can see it, the mass burial, the visit of the government delegation, the deputy governor, the district head of Rigasa, pictures there of people who have lost their loved ones whose life have been upended by this tragedy, all on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper for today. So you can follow the story on page 4 and do some further reading.
And now moving on to the next paper this morning is The Punch with the lead story there. Kaduna village bombing. Death toll hits 120 villagers. Allege military bomb twice. One family loses 32 members. Culprits must be punished. Survivors, ACF, JNI tell military. Army chief begs victims, says soldiers mistook villagers for bandits. Tinubu, Atiku, mourn. You can find details of this story on page 2 and page 3 of The Punch this morning. And the picture story there is a very devastating one where you can see survivors who are sitting, some in the health facility. It's indeed a sad one.
I can tell you, Aisha, from just looking at, the village, the Tudumbiri that we're talking about, and then the victims, and how there is basically no infrastructure whatsoever in that area, that this is perhaps the first time these people have been to a proper hospital in their lives, and it has to be because of this tragedy.
Below the picture story there, we have cabal running Akeredolu's government stealing funds. This is the PDP alleging that. You can find details of that story on page 8. There are lots of stories emerging from that state, but then you can find details of this particular story on page 8 of The Punch this morning. Truck crushes woman amid Lagos police Okada riders clash. This is another sad development coming out of Lagos State, but you can find details of this story on page 4 of The Punch newspaper. And over 9,000 civil servants fail promotion exam. That's quite an interesting one.
Productivity, right? And I think these promotional exams are very important because they are indicative of whether or not you're actually good at doing your job. I know civil servants are going to tell me off for saying this, but
but then again, I think the promotion exam shows whether you're actually good at your job or not, right?
Yeah, because if you're good, you should be able to make progress. How come you're failing
the promotion exam?
Yes.
Anyways, you can find details of that story on page 12 of the Punch newspaper. And above the paper, we have auction presidential aircraft bidders get December 24 deadline. You can find details of that story. If you have the money, you're free to go and get and purchase the presidential aircraft. But you can find details of that story on page 27 of the Punch. Federal government seeks 35 billion naira to revive Ajaokuta Steel. Wow. I think the federal government is still talking about the Ajaokuta Steel Company. I don't know the way forward anymore.
How about we just get rid of it as a government and put it in private hands?
Right.
Because I get the sense that it will work if it was in private hands, but you know.
Anyways, you can find details of that story, how the federal government intends to get 35 billion naira to revive Ajaokuta Steel Company on page 20 of the Punch this morning. And lastly, on the paper, Power Finance Ministries get 618 billion naira, beg your pardon, loan. CSOs kick. So civil society organizations are kicking against this particular huge amount of money, but you can find details of that story on page 19 of the Point this morning.
The borrowing and spending spree continues, irrespective of what Nigerians feel or are going through.
All right.
Well, let's turn our attention now to the front page of the Leadership newspaper for today. Above the nameplate, here's another disturbing development. ASU laments exodus of lecturers from public universities. Now, we did talk about the brain drain across board, but this is also one of those issues that signpost how our educational system is decaying, largely because we have a pool of talented, experienced lecturers who have had enough of the mess in the sector and are downing their tools to either turn to new professions or leave for greener pastures abroad. More on that story on page 7. Federal government to prosecute gender-based violence in schools, also on page 7. Below the nameplate, COP28, Minister, NNPC recommit to lowering methane emissions. And budget comments, Presidency accuses Obi of post-election trauma. That story you can also find on page 7. So I guess page 7 is well loaded on the Leadership newspaper for today. Kaduna bombing, Tinubu, northern governors, others demand probe. The writers say military apologizes, says terrorists disguised as civilians to evade attacks. Is that an explanation, or does that sound like an excuse? Because terrorists will always do what terrorists do, to find the best possible way to hide and to also find the most painful way to inflict terror on people. And the other writer says, requests notice of public gathering from residents. I mean, this will be a part of the military intelligence architecture, isn't it? So you know what the communities are up to. In other news, Imo Supreme Court fines Ozekome 40 million naira over frivolous case. Fox Petroleum offers $2.5 billion annual investment for Nigeria. And Ogbebena to receive Dame Lifetime Award. Israeli forces kill scores of Palestinians in southern Gaza. And you can also see the pictures there, some of the pictures from the devastation in that Kaduna bombing by the Nigerian army. That's it on the front page of the Leadership newspaper for today.
And lastly, before we get our analysts to speak on some of the issues, we'll have Business Day. We can't give you details of the papers without talking about business. And our lead story here is inside multi-billion naira Esther Code racketeering. That's an interesting one.
Esther Code racketeering?
Right.
Wow.
So that means a lot of people will still go ahead to racket for Esther Codes. However, you can get details of this story on page 30 of the paper. And beside that, patients reel over 1,390% antibiotics price jump. I'm very particular about this one. JSK Malls appointing Imperial Logistics as distributor in Nigeria. Anyways, you can find details of that story regarding why antibiotics are while there is a price jump for antibiotics in the country, and also
significant price
rise, and also the. Anyways, you can find details of that story on page 31 of the paper, and the big story on the front page is haulage cost spike spoils Christmas for shoppers. Well, details of that story on page 2 of the paper, and that's about it for Business Day.
People are actually shopping for Christmas anyway. Well, anyway, one person who probably definitely has a bill waiting for him to, perhaps discharge is the one we're going to talk to about the newspapers today. And he's not particularly looking jolly this morning. I wonder if it's the billing that is putting him in this kind of mood. Mr. Ben Shepherd, former Director News, Voice of Nigeria, is joining us this morning. Mr. Ben, good morning.
Morning.
Doesn't look like a good morning, judging by your face.
Truly, it's not too much a happy moment.
Right.
When this incident happened in my own state,
Right.
Kaduna State, and you're talking of how many people dead, and of course, as it is said in military terms, friendly fire. Now, there was a mistake made, a kind of. Here you are, Nigerian army. By mistake, you bomb the people who own you. You know, so it's not palatable for the civilian, it's not palatable for the military. My call is just that people should not make politics out of it. These are lives. And so
what's the best way to have an honest conversation about this? Because if we keep describing it as a mistake, we're kind of normalizing it. Because on the record, there have been 16 recorded attacks. The Daily Trust reported on the incident from March 2014 to date. And all of them, tens of people dying in every single one. And it has become a pattern. So how do we have this conversation without necessarily dragging the Nigerian military through the mud, but also being real about how this is actually damaging the military's reputation?
Yeah, you see, it happens. I'm not saying it ought to be, but check throughout the history of the world. Wherever you're having a war, whether it's the Gulf War, whether it's the World War I, II, whether it's Russia versus Ukraine, in the Middle East, you just find this kind of a thing. But what we are simply saying is exercising restraint, so that people do not see it as a kind of a culture, it's a normal thing, it ought to happen. There ought to be what you call Reiki, for example. Yeah, some people must be somewhere on ground that are natives who must have put a call through. We are seeing strange faces. You know, did it happen? That is another thing altogether. Then you're also talking of the intelligence. Now, intelligence can be by physical human beings. Some could be by unmanned surveillance vehicles. You have I mean, you just send in some equipment, a kind of, that go hoover, and by the time you send that, you're already analyzing, are these people actually armed, are they not, and all that stuff. If there was a misrepresentation, a misinterpretation of what they were seeing, it's another thing altogether. But like I've said, if we make it look like it's a culture, it ought to happen. The military is reckless. Oh, like the Amnesty International is saying, no, it's recklessness and all that stuff. There's no commander who, you have soldiers under you, and you go and put them under fire, they kill them, and you come back, you are victorious, your people are dead. No. You can't be happy. And good thing, when it happened, the first thing was that, oh, Nigerian Air Force bombed innocent people, because it happened in Ran. If you recall, it was the case of Air Force. So the Air Force just quickly checked their system and said, look, in the last 24 hours, we've never operated in Kaduna State. People are saying it's a lie, it's a lie, it's a lie. The military came, the soldiers came to say, no, 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 it's our own drone that did. So for them to have on it, for them to have apologized, for them to have said, okay, we're going to investigate. And by investigation, we want to know, yes, who ordered this? Was it properly? The chain of command, did it pass through and all that stuff, so that this could be avoided? The president, everybody, Atiku, Peter Obi, the government itself, citizens are saying, look, let's try to kind of stop this kind of a thing for the future.
Aisha and I were pointing something out yesterday. You look at that village, right? It looks like your typical village in Nigeria. No infrastructure, no access road. I mean, there is what looks like an access road, but from the footage we saw, I don't know if we can play that back, just to see, you know, how dilapidated some of the little structures they call homes look. You know, it speaks to not just the poverty, not just the underdevelopment, but, you know, the neglect from the government at state and at federal level. But then, You also talk about how easily accessible the military can get to that particular location with a drone. But the developments does not get to that. Do you understand the frustration of the people when they say the developments don't come, but the devastation finds a way to get to them, whether it's the bandits, destroying their lives, or mistakes like this that could, destroy an entire family?
Yeah, you see, without sounding a kind of being insensitive, anytime you have bandits, my going to Borno State, I realized that each time you have a situation where there are children, the elderly, Boko Haram will strike. Now, if you look at this community very well, where's the government presence there? There is none. And these situations, some of these bandits take the advantage of hibernating around these areas because nobody detects them. After all, government does not go there. Right. It's like an unoccupied environment. Let us occupy and dominate. So it says a lot in terms of even having military formations here and there, or you have what you call the surveillance aircraft. Once in a while, you hover around, see what is happening. But again, at the expense of human rights activists saying Nigeria is under a police state. They are now being monitored on air by. So whichever way one takes, there's always a fault in all of this. I remember there was this clash between some Fulanis and some Kagoro people in Kaura local government area. My brother, I went there. I was wondering what the fight was all about. No school, no hospital, nothing. Just that somebody was to have a kind of a wedding, so there was a bachelor's eve. So some people went and cordoned the area and killed the youth. That should be some 3 years ago. Rami, whatever now, I've forgotten the you just wonder, what, the attackers and the victims, truly, they all need human succor. They all need food. They all need the same security. They need education. They need hospitals. They need roads. Yet you just go and see this kind man-on-man kind of a thing in human treatment meted by fellow man on man. It's not the best. So when I see this in Tudumberi, it's like that same village. What really are we fighting for? It also means government has to take governance to these areas. And we've always been saying some things. There are times some government would say those areas never voted for us. Forget about them. If you do that kind of a thing, you'll be breeding real insurgency in these areas. So everybody is a federation. If you go by the fundamental objective of Chapter 2 of the Nigerian Constitution, when you said you will provide security, you provide cohesion, you provide everything that will ensure unity, and then these areas are in fact locked out. Go to many of these villages, whether northeast, even in the south, try going to Escravos. You just go and meet one small island like this, 2 thatch houses, and you begin to wonder, how do these people survive? Yet you see pipelines passing by those houses. They kind of provide some security for these pipelines around those areas. What do they get in return? So we think that government should be magnanimous. I mean, the military itself too. I think there should be some barracks in some areas that will curtail some of these things.
Mr. Ben, if I may, I like the fact that whilst you were responding earlier, you did talk about you hope that there wouldn't be political power play in responding to this sad incident that has happened in Beri community in Kaduna State. Now, this now brings me to the point where the government, I mean, Tinubu is ordering a probe. The state government itself, even the military, they are calling for investigation, to see where they went wrong and all that. And now there's also the aspect of compensation. Now, I'd like to know, do you think, you talked about power play, do you think compensation, the probe and everything, there is actually going to be, honesty and sincerity where whatever the compensation they intend to give out will get to these people, and this particular investigation and probe into what actually happened will actually, be done properly?
Let's put it technically and professionally, trust that the military will investigate exactly what happened. But security-wise, they might not divulge to the public.
Right.
They will do it. But for the compensation, yes, federal government via the same military will say this is compensation. But remember what happened in the case of Kano, where Pfizer gave some compensation. It brought a kind of a fight. People will want to know, we should have, no, I lost also members, no, my relations are this. Some will even inject names of those who never were killed or affected. I know it happened around Bondon area in Kaura local government, 2014 or thereabout. We have some people, look, 100 people were killed one single night. And when compensations were brought, you could see politicians injecting names of people that you never knew.
Right.
You could see houses born of opponents of those who are in government. They were never given any compensation. This I know because I went there. So when it comes to compensation, again, you have this lack of human angle to all of that. Right. The money will come. Some will feel, no, we are entitled to it more than that or that. Okay. Why should some people be fishing in troubled waters? Why is it that it is bad that the coffin seller will say, I'm making money? It shouldn't just be. Right. Humanity should be the best.
This is an ongoing conversation, and I get the sense that it's going to stick around for a while as we learn more about what the government is doing to address it, because we also understand that help is not necessarily there already for these people to perhaps, keep body and soul together, because most of them, they're breadwinners. Their breadwinners were the ones caught in the bombings, and they're left to still fend for themselves for the time being.
At least I can see that the government has taken some of the injured to Barabiko. So that's still the owning up aspect. I'm not the spokesman for the military, but I am simply saying that when it happens this way, I can assure you that, look, there's no way a government will just see this a civilian kind of, these are people worshipping God, who indeed, even if when you check the motto of the military, they say military comes only from God. And each time you also go to operations, you see that Muslims will be praying, the Christians will be there protecting. Should there be any bagger coming, the soldiers, I have been there, I show you photographs. But when you see them, they are a kind of a united force. The military is a culture that shows who Nigerians are.
Let's turn our attention to the leadership front page of the leadership newspaper, where there's a concern around a death or exodus of lecturers across public universities. I mean, yesterday we talked about what's happening in the healthcare sector. Thousands this year, between May to December this year, over 1,000 plus doctors have left Nigeria for greener pastures abroad. Right. Nurses are also leaving, and hospitals are having to cut down their services because they don't have enough personnel. Now it's happening in our universities. Your quick thoughts on that as we wrap things up.
Quickly, I recall that when we were in ABU in the 80s, early 80s, you could see that you had Jamaicans, Indians, Americans, Britons. They all were lecturers. If you go to secondary schools, you will find them, because all was well for Nigeria. Indians ran away from their place because it was not too okay. But today they have returned. And I'm telling you, sometimes in brain drain, there is brain gain. Some of these people will now go master some of these things. They'll come back to develop this country. It's going to happen.
But there's no way there's going to be... That is the question, isn't it? Sorry? At what cost? Because it's affecting causes, because you go to certain departments and there are not enough lecturers to deliver the service. I
agree with you. But I'm telling you, a time will come that we're all going to balance all of these things. But again, some people will insult me. Must everybody go to a university?
Right.
Because if you look at the technicians who are handling your railway here, you realize that in Chinese environment, are they really engineers or they are just technicians? They come and load it on Nigerian technicians. And so how many ordinary torchlight, how many engineers have made it in Nigeria? So if they go to China, they go to Britain, Japan and all that stuff, they will come back and say, come, there's a bigger market back home. Now I know the trick. They come in.
That is one way to look at it, the silver lining. But of course, the obvious challenge here is the shortfall and how it is going to undermine the output in our universities as well as other high institutions of learning. Mr. Ben, as always, thank you very much for your expert analysis. Really appreciate you for stopping by this morning. It's rather unusual not seeing you in your regular cheerful mood, but I can understand.
No, truly,
the current situation is quite sad enough.
I didn't find it funny. This kind of, I did not.
But thank you very much for joining us this morning.
33 in Taraba.
Right.
Also killed.
The numbers keep going, and that's the unfortunate situation that we have to deal with. Thank you most kindly for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Right, okay. This is where we sign off. Thank you most kindly for joining us. We do appreciate you for your time and company. Daybreak returns live and exclusive on Trust TV tomorrow at 8 a.m. My name is Abdullahi Ahmed. Thank you for watching.
And I'm Aisha Salihu. Enjoy the rest of the day.